When you finally finish building your product and that last sprint is done, your design is locked in, it feels like the hard part is over. And on this podcast, we've shared a ton of insights into that build phase and the nuances that come with it across different industries. But something we haven't talked about nearly enough is what happens after the build, actually bringing your product to market. How do you position it in a crowded space? How do you price it in a way that reflects actual value? And how do you keep everyone on your team from product to sales telling the same story? Today, we're unpacking all of that with Alain Mowad, VP of Product and Customer Marketing at Aspect Software. Alan has led product marketing through transformations, rebrands, and relaunches, and he's learned what really separates a launch that lands from one that fizzles. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Definitely. And before we jump in, I did mention Aspect Software in my intro, but for some quick context for our listeners, can you give us that elevator pitch? What does Aspect do in the simplest terms?
Yeah. We help organizations solve their toughest workforce challenges. The workforce is quickly evolving, and so being able to solve the very tough challenges that the workforce is facing today, and we do it through intelligent, data-driven solutions that simplify everything from planning to optimizing performance, capacity, and demand management, and accelerating smarter decisions.
And when your friends or family ask what you do, how do you explain your particular role in a way that people understand?
Yeah, it can be hard sometimes, but the way I typically phrase it to them is, look, I have two constituents. I serve two constituents and only two, right? One is the buyers, so people who buy from us. There's customers, existing customers. It can be prospects. So that's everything from how do I position the Aspect product suite for awareness, and then how do I get them to commit to buying, and then how do I retain them and even expand, as customers once they are a customer. The second constituent is my sellers. I enable my sellers to be able to sell the position and sell Aspect to our buyers. And that's everything around, not only our in-house sellers, but also our partner sellers. And we do everything basically to connecting the sellers with the buyers, with the customer. So that's really what I do. And I typically explain my role.
Perfect. And that gives us a really clear picture of where you sit in the world you're operating in. And it actually sets us up nicely for where we're headed in this conversation, because a lot of what you describe touches on what I mentioned that we don't talk enough about on this podcast, how you actually bring something to market.
Right.
So before we get too deep into frameworks and strategies, I'd like to start with the basics. For those who don't necessarily live in the same world, the marketing world as you do, how would you explain go to market in simple terms? What does it actually mean and entail?
Yeah. Um, I always go to the four P's. So this is what we learned in school over the years, and it's just something that's, continues to be important in terms of go-to-market activities. So the four P's are product. So what products do we have? What products or services are we offering? The design, the quality, the branding, the features, etc. The second is price. What are we doing around a price to make it attractive? Is it a value-based pricing, seat-based pricing? That'll influence, it influences customer perception, math. The third P is place. And that's how are we going to sell the product? Are we going to sell it direct? Are we going to sell it through a channel? Are we going to sell it online? And then the last is promotion. And that's the one that a lot of people tend to associate with go-to-market is that last piece is promotion. It's the demand gen piece, which is the branding, the website updates, the social posts, the blogs, all the collateral that's available that promotes the product and service that we're bringing to market. But these four P's are very critical to a proper go-to-market strategy and proper product launch.
I think a lot of people equate go to market with kind of what you said, that promotion piece. It is
Yeah.
that one, like just promoting the app, et cetera. You teed up my next question is that a fair assumption that go to market is only about a campaign or marketing? It sounds like there's a lot more that goes into it, as you said.
Yeah, it's really a component of it, but it's not the only thing. It's the one that's most visible to anyone on the outside, right? Anyone who's a receiver, net receiver of the information, who's looking at our website, that's seeing our blog posts, that's seeing, what have you. That's the external facing. That's the one thing that's why people tend to associate it with, oh, that's a go-to-market. But go-to-market is a lot more than that. It comes into the inception of the product, planning, product fit, all the way to pricing it, making sure we're addressing the white space where our competitors aren't playing, where we can differentiate. And then how do we bring it to market? How do we launch this product and get it out there so customers can consume it?
Amazing. And I know you sit across and you have worked across both product and the marketing side. At what point in the, I guess, let's say the product building process should teams start thinking about a full go-to-market strategy? Is there a good point in the life cycle of a product that they should start considering that?
I think it starts right at product inception, honestly. So
Okay.
understanding the product fit, how we go to market with a product. We have a product idea, right? Testing the idea, saying, is this something that we think we can sell that can contribute to our top and bottom lines, et cetera? Is it a fit for the type of business that we are, right? Is it a product that's in our wheelhouse that we can develop and deploy? So it really starts at the ideation phase of a new product where we're trying to figure out what it is that we want to bring to market, right? So you've already been thinking about this product, how it'll fit in the broader marketplace. What are our competitors offering? I mentioned white space earlier. Where do we differentiate and compete, right? If we were to launch this product in a crowded space, what would differentiate us? What would make us exciting? What would make customers look at us versus our competitors? And then how to effectively position and sell this product, including how much revenue we're going to expect from the product and what kind of margins we can expect. So this is all critical information you need to have up front to build a proper go-to-market campaign. Because once you have those basic in place, then you can start defining the go-to-market tactics. What tactics am I going to use to launch and get this product in market?
That's really interesting. And I think I'm going to speak from my side of the product building and not necessarily the go-to-market side of things. I think from a process standpoint, we as designers like to go through the entire process of wireframing, designing, having everything sort of figured out to develop that USP, if you will. Obviously, there's a North Star, there's a vision that we're trying to hit, but
Mhm.
sometimes things don't become clear for us until we get to that end goal, until we get to that milestone. And you're saying that it's good to think about it from the onset. So, can you share how you might start to uncover what truly makes a product different when on the surface, some of these tools look very similar to things on the market? How do you start building this unique sell point early on?
Yeah, so when we're building a unique selling point, it's a great question and it's a critical one. A lot of people tend to lead with product features, product capabilities. Here's why our product is better than everyone else's kind of thing. We a proper if you really want to make it successful, you really have to take a very different approach. You have to stop talking at customers and talking with them. And the way you do that is and learning from them and understanding what their needs and their requirements are. And so what we do when we're selling and positioning and selling products is we lead with outcomes. So how does our product address a customer's key pain points in a way that none of our competitors can? So in Aspect's case, for example, there's a lot of similarities with our workforce engagement management solution and those of our competitors. But when you start digging down into the layers underneath, this is where we shine. We have a feature set that is unmatched in the industry that responds specifically to what large complex organizations need and require. Once we've done that, then we explore how other elements of the business can be a differentiation. So it's not just the product, right? We at Aspect call it the three Ps. This product, people, and process. We have a deep bench of expertise that we leverage and use. And this is important because it's a complex product to implement. So you need the expertise and the experience. And then the process of actually implementing it and making it successful and demonstrating ROI to the customer is something we have a tremendous amount of experience with. And so that's the reason I bring that up is to say that, look, it's more than just, first of all, you lead with outcomes. And then don't just look at the product, but look at all of the other elements of the business that combined make you the primary candidate for when a customer is considering your solution.
I'm going to raise my hand as someone who has fully led with a feature as kind of my unique sell point, even working with other people. That seems to be probably the first place everyone goes to is, feature ABC is what we're going to
Yeah.
sell. So I'm really taking all of this in. That is really great insight. I'm curious to know how competitive insights also shape your messaging or your product story. So when you're looking at other people on the market, other platforms or tools, how does that go into account when you are thinking about how you position?
Yeah, we look at various different things. First of all, we look at the size of the market. We also look at who the players are, who the leaders are, what are they offering, why are customers buying from them, and what are they missing, right? So what is it that, what would compel a customer to say if, everything else is equal, we look at, vendor A and vendor B. When they look at vendor B, they come back and say, oh, vendor B is, vendor B has these specific features and capabilities that vendor A does not have. And so I'm more inclined to go with them. And so we go through a whole very detailed analysis from a competitive standpoint, looking at everything from, again, market size. What is our potential addressable market? Is there any displacement opportunities, displacing competitors? What do those competitors have? How do we differentiate, whether it's through product features and capabilities or whether it's through our whole go-to-market approach in terms of how we position and sell the product? And then
Mhm.
understanding, everything from pricing to what kind of discounts do they offer, et cetera. So we get a very holistic competitive picture, which helps us when we go to market with a differentiated product solution. So it does appear and act differentiated once it's out in market.
That's great. Thank you. And I heard you mention like discounts and getting pricing right, et cetera. I do want to transition now into, I think, one of the hardest parts of kind of go to market, which is pricing.
Yep.
Because I think you can nail a product, you can nail positioning, messaging really well. But if the pricing doesn't match the perceived value, I think a product can really fail when it comes to that aspect of it. So
Yeah.
I guess let's start with why is pricing so hard to get right, even for seasoned teams? Why is it so complex and just difficult?
Yeah, you're 100% right, by the way. Pricing is, in my opinion, the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to tackle. It's hard because if you have in a saturated market, you have a lot of a lot of vendors offering similar pricing. It gets very difficult for a customer to really understand. Like, okay, well, it's $20 per seat here, it's 15 here. What's the delta of $5? So it's a bit of you're running into a bit of an issue there. It's really more around when you think about pricing, we always ground our pricing at value, translation to value.
Mm.
So, um, what our customers are buying is the value. It's not the product, it's the value that the product brings to them. Helps them save time, helps them save money, helps them run more efficiently, helps them retain their talent. So it's when you're doing the competitive analysis from the pricing, you really can't do an apples to apples. You can do an apples to apples comparison, but that's not really what the outcome's going to be. It's understanding, nailing down how the price reflects value. So a lot of cases, people think if I have the lowest price, that's my competitive advantage. That's wrong because a lot of vendors will charge more than their competitors for the product, but the perceived value they're getting from the product is superior to what the competitors are offering. So customers are willing to pay the premium because they see the value. And that's really, that's the approach we take. We look at a variety of different metrics and we even look at things like, well, hey, we're moving to this new business model. Customers were revolving into this business model. Why don't we just change our pricing to move from, it could be we're on seat pricing today. We're going to move to consumption pricing. We're going to move to value-based pricing or outcomes-based pricing. And so all these things we take into account. And you're right, it takes a long time. It takes us months. It takes everyone months, really, to really get right. And you're right, you got to hit it the first time when you go to market, because it backfires if it doesn't work, right?
Yeah. And I heard you trying to going into different pricing models. I am not familiar with how many exists out there. Are you able to talk about some of them at a high level just so we get an
Sure.
understanding of different ways to approach it?
Yeah. So there's the so the classic and we're still where a lot of vendors are today is what they call seat based pricing. So if you're a named user, or a concurrent user. So you can have concurrent licenses. We mean up to 100 people can share a pool of licenses, right? So once you reach
Right.
100, boom, no one else can use it. Or you can move to named user. So, every named user has a license. So a lot of software works this way. So it's certainly Salesforce and other the large vendors work this way. There's a consumption-based pricing, which was popularized by Amazon mainly through their AWS service. So you pay only for what you use, right? Is basically
Mhm.
consumption-based pricing. You don't use it, you don't pay for it, right? And as you use more of it, you'll obviously be paying more, but there are potentially discounts because you're using more. You're generating more volume. There's outcomes-based pricing is another popular one that a lot of vendors are either exploring or actually implemented, which is we promise an outcome. Every time that outcome occurs, we get paid. If the outcome does not occur, we don't get paid, right? So that's a way, consumption as well as outcomes-based pricing is really a way for a really good way for vendors to have some skin in the game in terms of we are now financially, we are now being compensated for your success. And so it
Right.
is our best interest to make sure you succeed. So those are three popular models. There's other, other
Okay.
models out there, but those are the three most common ones, especially in the business to business space. That's what you'd see.
Yeah. Thank you for breaking that down. And going back again, you were talking about how to determine pricing and the best way to position it. I know you mentioned, that perceived value again and how to really speak to that customer instead of speaking at them. How can you give us some tips or best practices on how you can define and communicate value in a way that resonates with your end users? Like, what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it comes down to defining clear outcomes, right? So when you go into a business, the first step we take when it's a new prospect is we listen to them. So, okay, what are your problems? What we're trying to suss out are what are the pain points? What are the struggles that you're dealing with that your current solution, or maybe you don't have one, is not solving for you? Based on that, then we have a set of benchmarks and metrics that we've used time and time again with numerous customers um, that tell us, this is really what good looks like. This is where we think you need to be. Do you agree? Yes. Okay. Here's where you are now. We can get you from here to here. Okay. And how much is that worth to you? How much of the value does that bring to you?
Mhm.
And that's the conversation. These are the conversations we have with our customers that actually compels them. We've had win back customers. Customers come back to us because they were sold a bill of goods. They went to another vendor. They came back and said, you know what? They just don't do what you guys do. They don't give us the same, not so much the features and capabilities. They don't give us the same outcomes. We saved a whole lot of money when we implemented you. We were able to retain our talent, 80% of our talent retention from 40%, before, et cetera, et cetera. So it's these outcomes that really, and just continuing to prove those outcomes and expose those outcomes to the customer and say, look, you were here, now you're here. And now we can get you from here to the next level, which is, this state of improvement, um, is where they continue to perceive the value of the product. And they're just, it's, it's very difficult to dislodge or a vendor, when you've
Mhm.
actually proven to them that you're giving them the value that they were looking for.
So I have a follow-up question to that. When we're talking about value, and I'll give you an anecdote from my own life. I do pay for apps now, and there's some that, I think are worth it, some that are not.
Right.
Without naming the app, there was one that went from a free model to a paid model, and the pricing was just outlandish for what you were getting. So I saw within a span of 3 months, their pricing model just kept drastically dropping, 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 I guess until they started seeing people actually buying into it. Even then, I had to personally wait for a discount code because I wasn't willing to pay that price. But once I did pay it, I saw all the actual features and the actual value. Now I'm like, okay, I will renew every year because now the value, I see it. So I'm wondering if you have any anecdotes where pricing was actually a barrier, and it was, the value was communicated, but users weren't seeing it. So, how do you kind of break that down? Are discount codes a good best practice to get people in the door to see value, or is it just really strong marketing to communicate the value? How do you kind of bridge all the gaps when a buyer is very discerning about where they spend their money?
Yeah, I did. It's a question. It's a great question. We run into this challenge all the time. I think a lot of companies do.
Yeah.
It's the example that you gave, which I really like. It's like, okay, this is too high. This is too high. Oh, maybe this price could possibly work. You don't want to do that, right? You don't want to start like, I'm going to price this thing in an outrageous level, and then let's see what feedback is and adjust because it's very hard to recover from that.
Yeah.
Basically, what you're saying is, okay, my product was $30, now it's $50, which means that that's $15 of perceived value wasn't really value at all, right? So it's a dangerous game to play. I think the what we but just to pivot back to your question about value, we spent a lot of time um, there's a lot of noise in every industry, not just
Mm,
ours, but in every industry, right? So vendors are going to come in with, hey, we have an integrated solution. It's better. It's cheaper. It does everything you need. And they tend to obfuscate things. So, um, we go through a lot of pains, and I know a lot of companies do the same thing to continue to clarify that, yes, theirs is $10 cheaper, but here's why it's $10 cheaper. And here's what you're not going to get as a result. So constantly pushing that envelope, to make sure that they see that they're paying fair price for something they're going to get value out of. Now, we've had prospects who said, no, we're going to go with this other vendor. 6 months to a year later, they come back and say, you know what? We realized that wasn't right because we didn't dig into it's like an onion, right? You peel back the onion. Now we started to see these layers underneath that were not good, right? That just didn't meet our needs. And so now we're back talking to you again. So again, just keeping that, even though you might lose them initially, at some point they may come back and say, look, yeah, here's the value. We get it. Look, we get it now. We totally get it. We get why you're more expensive. We get why, you're positioning it the way you did. And this is what's gonna, and that's what gets, a lot of customers. We've had customers leave and come back. We've had prospects we've lost that have come back to re-engage with us. And it's all because we
yeah.
continue to articulate and keep value top of mind for them.
So that's great. And for teams getting ready to launch their first product or up a new product, what advice would you give them on where to even start with a pricing strategy? I think you spoke about it a little bit before. I feel like the natural inclination is to look at your competitors on the market and to price based off of them. Um, but
Yeah.
you said that's not necessarily the best way to do it. So how might you approach it if you don't want to get stuck on just pricing it based off of being competitive with, company B down the street?
Yeah, and it comes down again to, I keep saying value, but it's around,
Yeah.
when you're going to price it, you got to price it in a way. There's a conflicting sort of thing going on here, right? Obviously you've got revenue and profit requirements, which the finance department is going to be, very, very hard on, right? In terms of, we need this amount of margin, we need this amount of revenue. And you have to answer to them, right? You have to have a response to that, as part of the pricing strategy. But the other side of it is, we need to price it so it's competitive, so that, accurately reflects the value that we're bringing to our customers. And so we use competitive information definitely as a starting point. We talk to analysts frequently about, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this pricing model? What do you think of that pricing model? We pressure tested with our sales team. We pressure tested with, a bunch of informed like decision makers, such as, the analyst community. And then finally look at the results. We look and say, okay, the last thing we look at is, how much do you think they're going to discount this, right? So if we start at a $30 price point and they're discounting it to $15, that's not good, right? There's a 50% discount.
Right.
It means we're not pricing it right. And so understanding what the discount model looks like, and then understanding, when we do set the price, that we're setting the price correctly. And that's, again, I won't call it a dark art, but it's a really hard thing to do. And it requires a lot of stakeholders and a lot of different people, as I'm sure you know, to actually get it right. That's why it takes months. And I can't
Yeah.
stress enough to anybody, take the time you need to get the pricing right. It is absolutely critical.
Yeah. And I think something that we keep coming back to, right, and that you've said multiple times is value, 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 communicating the right value. So I kind of want to transition now to aligning the different teams around your product and product value, right? Because not only
Yep.
does the marketing team need to communicate value, obviously your product team needs to communicate value through user experience. Uh, Everyone needs to be speaking the same language. So how do you make sure all these different teams, whether it's product, marketing, sales, stay in sync around a shared story as so many things change, as product changes, pricing changes? What are ways to keep everyone aligned and saying the same thing, whether they're focused on UX or they're focused on marketing?
Yep. Totally. I think many people think of go-to-market as a single motion, but it's actually not a single
Mm,
motion. It's an orchestrated motion with multiple steps, multiple touch points. Again, as we mentioned, we were talking earlier, it starts with product inception, goes to launch, and then there's all the post-launch activities, right? So, as part of the go-to-market, as part of the go-to-market strategy, you have to engage with the key stakeholders early. That's sales, that's finance, that's the product team, obviously. just the key stakeholders within the organization, as well as your extended team. Because I mentioned pressure testing pricing as an example, which would be, the members of the analyst community, potentially some existing customers that are willing to give us feedback or provide us feedback. Um, all these things come together and has to be orchestrated. And one of the things I like to, I don't joke about this, but one of the things a product marketing team do pretty regularly is project manage, right? It's a project manager. It's not
Right.
necessarily the top skill of a product marketer, but it's one that they flex regularly because they're really the orchestrator. They're the ones going in and pulling in all the different stakeholders and putting together a go-to-market plan and a strategy and, working to get pricing finalized, et cetera, and setting up all the demand generation activities, promos, everything else. And that's throughout the life cycle. So it's not just conception to launch, post-launch. What do we do after? How do we go and expand in that customer account? How do we retain that customer? So it's really, that whole, that's why I call it an orchestrated motion, because it's multiple steps with multiple stakeholders. I mentioned sales, right? I didn't even bring in the CSMs, the customer success managers,
Right.
right? The implementers, like they're all part of this, part of a proper go-to-market.
So you just mentioned, right, product iteration, and you continue to build upon it. Um, how do you know when it's time to revisit your strategy? Say that you are iterating and you're adding new features. When might it be time for you to say, okay, we have had this product on the market for X amount of time. It is in a very different spot now. The value is a lot higher now. Um, is there a good kind of thought process you go through there to understand that it's time to kind of reevaluate things?
Yep. I think we do that on an ongoing basis. Our industry doesn't move, we're not moving at the, innovation. Innovation's obviously progressing and we're, with a lot of innovations coming out, but, we think maybe you got to pick a cadence, right? And say, okay, every
Mhm.
3 months, every 6 months, every year, we're going to year would be too long. It's a 3 to 6 month. Let's reevaluate what we're offering. And the way we do that is several ways. Again, the analyst community, we leverage them a lot, right, to get feedback and input. We look at market dynamics and trends, but we also talk to our sellers. Our sellers are probably one of our biggest assets when it comes to this. Not only this, but other things. But they're ears on the ground. They're the ones who listen to prospects. They're getting feedback from prospects. We use a bunch of tools like Gone, for example, that helps us capture these insights from customers and discern nuances of things that, wow, 6 months ago, all they were talking about was forecasting. Now everyone's talking about scheduling. That seems to be the big thing now, right? So getting a better sense for that and then adapting and pivoting our product offering and also adapting our roadmap to take into account the feedback and the input we're getting from these stakeholders.
Great. And I've got one final question on this topic here, but you obviously come from a large company, just a lot of different teams and people. For
Yeah.
smaller teams, maybe for smaller startups or entrepreneurs, people that don't necessarily have the people, the resources, or any sort of go-to-market strategy or structure in place, are there kind of simple steps they could start making to start thinking about that? I know it sounds overwhelming. There's a lot to do, but are there some basic things they could do today that will set them up
Yeah.
for the future?
Yeah, I would even argue big companies that are sort of reinventing themselves or bigger companies
Mm.
that, have decided to become more agile will run into this problem as well. Right. So, um, it starts with just simple communication. So let's start with a basic thing. Like, for example, if you use Slack or you use Teams or whatever, right? Start a group, let's start a session and say, okay, let's brainstorm, what things need to be done. We use Slack internally, for example, but, um, establish checkpoint meeting and collaboration spaces so that you can collaborate both online and offline. And then as you're evolving sort of your go-to-market plan, figure out what works and what doesn't work and build a go-to-market framework that works for your business. This is really a key thing. Go-to-market framework for Aspect may not be the framework that works for your company. May not be, right? So you have to come up with a go-to-market framework that works for you based on who your ideal customer profile is, who it is you're selling to, the addressable market, et cetera, et cetera. So really getting that with those fundamentals, it's kind of like I would equate it to, I use this analogy a lot, but I'm putting wheels in the car while I'm driving it. But that's really, the pace small companies go, or even large companies are reinventing themselves. Like it's a fast pace and you just can't stop and say, I'm going to spend 3 months building a GDM plan. No, you build it while you're putting it together and executing on it and then iterate on it so that with each release, each launch, your go-to-market framework actually evolves and becomes better.
Yeah, that's great. I actually did another episode recently where it was the same thing where you can't wait to make decisions, right? And you kind of have to make decisions with all the information you have now and make intelligent risks, understanding that you might have to adjust things later.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
really love
exactly right.
that
Yeah.
feedback there. I know we've covered a lot right now. Before we close things out, I do like to transition and do a little quick fire session. So I'm going to throw out maybe one or two statements your way. Just want your quick take, no overthinking, kind of gut reaction in like 30 seconds or less. Let's do two here. Okay, here we go. What is a common go-to market mistake that you see over and over again?
Oh, common go-to-market mistake is don't plan. You don't plan. You're kind of, hey, we're gonna. It is. Trust me, I've worked at companies where that's been the case, where they just kind of let's just roll and go. There's no like formal plan or like what are the expected outcomes, right? And then we're stuck with, okay, we launched the product, so what now? We don't have any metrics on anything. So that's what I mean by plan. Coming up with a plan to a proper plan so that as you go through each stage of the go-to-market phase, you're executing, reviewing, making sure you got the right metrics. Are we getting our targets, et cetera, et cetera.
Amazing. Let's do one more here. What is one buzzword in tech or marketing that you'd love to retire forever?
Yeah, that's a great one. There's so many buzzwords in marketing and all around in the industry. I would say the one that probably is my biggest pet peeve that I'd like to see retired is the term going forward. Yeah, going forward, we're going to do this. Going forward, okay, why don't we just do it now? Right now is the time to do it. Not going forward, but it's now. So now, if there's one term, like I said, a pet peeve for me is that term. Every time I hear it, I go, just hesitate a bit, and then, but that would be it.
You're not the only person I've heard want to get rid of that as well. So I've heard that before. But that's a good one here. Thank you
It's
for
not real
playing
work.
along. Before we go, we like to wrap up with what we call our Majestyk Bite. If listeners can walk away with one thing from this episode, what would that be?
Um, there are so many resources out there today. If you're looking to do a proper go-to-market plan, there's a lot of stuff available online. Um, really take the time to put together the framework and build your go-to-market plan properly. Because once you do that, and like I said, it's going to be in iterations. Once you do that, you'll have a solid go-to-market, and you'll see the results of that in terms of the success of your product as well as the company, right? Overall. So.
Awesome. And Alan, where can people go to learn more about you and about Aspect? Anywhere you want to shout out?
Yeah, definitely. So, if you're interested in learning more about Aspect software, what we're doing around workforce engagement management, you can visit our website. We have a lot of good information there, www.aspect.com. Company's been around for a very long time. So, and we've been through multiple iterations, but a good place to go to see our latest product innovations and what we're working on. So encourage you all to go visit that. And if you have any workforce engagement management needs, we're the company for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today and for breaking down what go-to-market really means. I know we barely just scratched the surface, but I think our listeners are going to walk away with some practical and approachable advice for thinking about these things.
Yeah, thank you.
We
This
will
is
link.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll link to Aspect and resources in the show notes. But our listeners are going to walk away with a very clear understanding of strategy, pricing, positioning, all fit together in how to bring a product to life. So thank you, Alan. And for those of you tuning in, thanks as always for listening. If you found this episode helpful, give us a follow, leave a review, share it with someone who you think will find it valuable. This is the Product Builders Podcast, and we'll see you next time.